Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we are going to talk about the mallow family. This is marshmallow. This is several varieties of mallow. They are really fairly common in the wild. If you learn to identify them, you won't have any shortage of them. Mallow is an herb I've never had to buy. And you may find at least a couple of members of this family being grown in your landscaping already as ornamentals. You may know those as like hibiscus or rose of Sharon. Those are actually the same family as marshmallow. Marshmallow is not the candy. I'm not talking about Stay Puft marshmallows. But the original marshmallow candy was made from the mallow plant. Very useful herb. Fascinating history. Definitely one that's another one of those what I would consider the indispensable herbs. I think every herbalist ought to have a few varieties of mallow growing in the garden and some in the herbal medicine cabinet for use when needed. But before we get into that, I promised last week I would give you my great Uncle Joe's Chili Verde recipe. Absolutely delicious. And I told you a little bit about him last week. He was a real character. He just passed away this last year. He was in his 90s. And he was one tough monkey. I mean, he was tough. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a pilot. He had a small plane. He crashed it a time or two. I told you last week how he taught me to fly by basically taking me up in the plane and handing the controls over and saying, figure it out. And he would have crashed the plane again had I not figured it out. He was really one of my favorite family members because we were a lot alike in a lot of ways. Both have, very active minds, interested in a lot of stuff. He was a little different though. Uncle Joe was intense, very intense and hot-tempered. He took after my great-grandmother, who was an absolute spitfire. I mean, my great-grandmother, she looked like Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies. And she was just about that feisty. She would literally, at the drop of a pin, she would have grabbed a cane and just beaten somebody if they had done anything to threaten her or her family, or really just crossed her on the wrong day. She would have really torn into somebody, and she was great. Absolutely loved her. Absolutely loved my great grandfather, who was the polar opposite. My great grandfather, her husband. Totally different heritage. He was French. She was Scots-Irish with probably a little Lumbee Indian mixed in. She was feisty, spitfire, loved anything that had to do with fighting. I mean, when the woman was in her 80s and 90s, she would watch pro wrestling on TV and cheer. She's like, hit him, hit him. She loved fights. She liked seeing dogs fight. I mean, she made her sons fight. She was just, she was tough. She was really tough, and my great Uncle Joe took after her. But my great grandfather was quiet, saintly, fake deafness most of probably the last 20 years of his life because he got tired of her, fussing at him all the time. and a farmer. I take more after him. He was a great at curing hams and making sausages. You know, he raised his own hogs. He loved to fish and hunt. He had a cattle and crops and just a. I mean, he was a beekeeper. He was also, yeah, a really good beekeeper, and he was an artist. He'd actually, before World War One, he had planned to go to New York and be a fashion designer. Believe it or not, from rural southeastern North Carolina, that was his dream. But then he got drafted into World War One, and his job was accompanying the bodies home, and it really changed him. You know, he really changed him. He still drew and such. He played harmonica. He taught me to play harmonica when I was in my teens, or early teens, true, probably closer to 12. That was the first instrument I played, and he gave me a harmonica, and really thought the world of him. He was, I loved them both, really. My great grandmother made the best biscuits. We are talking buttermilk biscuits with buttermilk from the cows out back, lard from the hogs. The only thing they didn't grow and mill themselves was the wheat, and they would do that on for trade. There was a mill, and he'd take corn down, and for a percentage of his corn, you know, he'd bring back a few sacks of flour. And my word, it was good. And his bees were right near a swamp full of sweet gum trees, and that's what we call Tupelo honey. Usually called more of that in like Mississippi, and anyway, but that's where the brand name is known as now. But it was very unlike any other honey. It was almost black. It was as black as molasses, as brown as molasses, and it was hot on the throat, and it was just amazing, wonderful honey. And I mean, you take one of those buttermilk biscuits, put some butter on it, and again, the butter. My great grandmother would churn it right there in the kitchen. It came from the milk from the cows right out the back. So fresh butter on a hot buttermilk biscuit straight out of the oven with some of that dark honey and a slice of country ham fried till it was, you know, crispy brown on the edges. That's the best thing in the world. I mean, it just will never get any better than that. And they lived to be 94 and 96. I mean, I really got to spend a lot of my childhood with them, and it was a great experience. But back to Uncle Joe. Like I said, he took after my great grandmother, and he was just real volatile and had an opinion on everything. And he was, you know, drop of a pen, he was ready to fight. He picked on me mercilessly. I mean, when I was like 5 years old, he took me up in his airplane. He went up there and like started causing 1,000-foot drops to make me cry as a child, and he picked on me about that for the rest of my life, for the rest of his life, I guess I would say. He was politically conservative. He loved his guns. He loved to shoot, and just a real kind of Duck Dynasty Cy or Phil Robertson kind of character. Well, at some point he got into RVing, and he used to spend a lot of time out in Arizona and New Mexico and around in that area. And then another part of the year he'd be up in Virginia, and he got into bluegrass music and was thrilled to find out, you know, that I knew Doc Watson and had learned to play the music and everything. And so we just always kind of connected on many things, whereas I didn't connect a lot with a lot of my other family members. He always took an interest, and I really did think the world of him. Still do. His pork chili recipe was brilliant, and it's because he married the flavors of Eastern North Carolina barbecue with the southwestern flavors of like a chili verde, of a green chili. And it was so good. And he entered into competitions. He won competitions. He shared it with me. I have modified it slightly. Here's the way we do it, okay? This is the way I do it. This is probably 80% based on his recipe. First of all, you got to have barbecued pork. And I do not mean roasted pork cooked over natural gas or whatever, or an electric oven. I mean, you know, Smithfield barbecue, that's not real barbecue. If that's the only North Carolina barbecue you've ever had, you don't know barbecue. If you've eaten something called North Carolina pulled pork, you've never had North Carolina barbecue, because we don't pull pork in North Carolina. I don't know why they keep saying that on the Food Network. It's a load of crap. The only time pork gets pulled in North Carolina is at a pig picking, where you take a whole hog and slowly smoke it over oak and hickory coals for at least 20 hours. And then it's laid out and everybody just pulls off a chunk they like. That's the only time pork gets pulled in North Carolina. There is absolutely no such thing as North Carolina pulled pork. There's also east of Charlotte, really should still be, any barbecue sauce should never have tomato products, no ketchup, and no sugar in it. We don't do that. I mean, you go west of Charlotte, yeah, they start putting in ketchup. I mean, Lexington barbecue sauce is very sweet. It's got tomato, ketchup in it, and it's got sugar. Sometimes down around Salisbury, they even put in cheer wine, which is a cherry flavored soda. Frankly, that disgusts me. I hate their barbecue sauce. I love their pork, though. They do a very good job with pork shoulders, smoking them low and slow over natural hickory and oak coals for 10 to 12 hours. Excellent barbecue, absolutely horrible sauce and slaw. Sorry, it just is. It's disgusting. I don't candy my meat. Eastern North Carolina barbecue sauce is apple cider vinegar, salt and pepper, and some cayenne pepper. Maybe a few other spices. You can get a little, interesting with it. You can tailor it to your taste. But it has no ketchup in it. It has no molasses in it. It has no brown sugar in it. And everything they show on Food Network is a complete, utter lie when it comes to North Carolina barbecue. And they really should know better. After all, Guy Vietti's family is from here, but he keeps calling the stuff North Carolina barbecue that has nothing to do with North Carolina barbecue. A North Carolina barbecue sauce, in his words, is just like any syrupy, sweet tomato sauce, like, I don't know, Cattleman's or Heinz, with some apple cider vinegar added to it. I mean, that's not North Carolina barbecue sauce. Not eastern part of the country, anyway. In our region, in the region where my great uncle was from, where my family lived since about the 1600s, you take a pig. You do not put some kind of sugary, spicy rub on the meat. No, you do not. You rub it down with salt. That's it. You smoke it directly over hardwood coals. Usually hickory, usually oak, but you can definitely use, pecan wood, apple wood, pear wood, whatever you like. Dogwood is actually particularly good. You cook it at a very low temperature. You can lay your hand right on a metal cooker, the metal lid that goes over even, an old-fashioned barbecue pit is just a hole in the ground with some rebar or green sticks laid across of it and the coals shoveled up under it. You put your pig in there and cover it with an old piece of barn tin. You monitor the temperature just by putting your hand on it. As it cooks, the fat drips down on those coals and it burns, and that's actually where the flavor comes from. The flavor of legitimate Eastern North Carolina barbecue does not come from spices and seasonings and sugar and all that junk. It comes from the flavor of the natural pork fat dripping onto live hardwood coals, combining with the flavor of the smoke from that real wood. There's no place for gas or electric in this. There is no place for charcoal briquettes. This is real wood. That flavors the meat, and it is superb. Nothing compares to it. I mentioned before, I have catered doing real Eastern North Carolina style barbecue before. I've had people line up saying they didn't even like barbecue and they wanted to know how many pounds of mine they could take home. It was so good that they had never actually tried Eastern North Carolina sauce, and they thought barbecue sauce was all sweet, and what I had was just absolutely delicious. The best commercial brand, by the way, is Scott's out of Goldsboro, North Carolina. Scott's barbecue sauce is phenomenal. It's about the only traditional North Carolina barbecue sauce left. And, I've had vegetarians and vegans who were lured in by the smell of the barbecue cooking on real live hardwood coals, saying they were just going to have to take a day off of their diet. They had to try it, and they fell in love with it and ended up buying extra pounds of the meat to take home. That's how good the real deal is, and you will probably not find it anywhere outside of someone's backyard in North Carolina in the eastern part of the state, and only then if someone taught them how to do it right. My family actually used to have a little chain of barbecue restaurants. most people these days cook with gas and electric, and they're not making barbecue, they're making roasted pork. Okay? Now, I've been on my soapbox about that, but the bottom line is you have to have some of that good, legitimate, real barbecue, real smoked pork. Then you're going to make a base of tomatillos. Tomatillos are in the ground cherry family. They're like green tomatoes. Chop them up, throw them in the pot. A little bit of lard in there, a little bit of water in there, onions, garlic. I like a lot of cumin. Cilantro. I like a lot of cilantro. That's sort of the base of the flavor, salt and pepper, you know. You cook all that down with a lot of green peppers. I love poblanos fresh. I can throw in some dried ones. I can't even remember the name of the dried one right now. Go to the Mexican aisle. Really easy to find. You got, Pasillos are really good. Anaheims. I cannot remember the name of the dried poblano. Another excellent addition to this is, as I told you last week, how I smoke and dry jalapenos to preserve them. I smoke them on a barbecue pit, so you get more of that good smoky flavor in there. If you don't have that, use a can of chipotle peppers and adobo sauce. Yeah, the adobo is basically a Mexican barbecue sauce. It's vinegar and it's a little sweet. Those peppers are usually good and hot and nice and smoky. And to a whole pot of chili, one little can of chipotle and adobo's going to add a phenomenal flavor, and it's not going to overwhelm. It's actually going to really complement the pork very well. In fact, I would usually add a can of chipotle and adobo to this green pork chili if I didn't have a lot of my own peppers on hand. If I don't have chipotle peppers and adobo, I'd add a little Scott's barbecue sauce or a little, homemade North Carolina barbecue sauce, which, like I said, is basically just apple cider vinegar cut with a little water so it's not too acidic, cayenne pepper, salt, pepper, whatever else you please. Maybe some people put a little garlic powder in there, some people don't. Some people put a little onion powder in there, some people don't. You're not looking at like sweet spices like cinnamon and all that. No, this is just basically spicy vinegar. So yeah, I'd add, a little bit of that if I did not have a can of chipotles with adobo. Rinse your cans out with beer. You're going to add at least a couple of bottles of beer, whatever brand you like. Some white beans. I think white lima beans, dried, reconstituted, soaked overnight and then added. Or navy beans are very good. Any white bean, or you could use pintos. Pintos, they're a little brownish, but they're still going to work. You're just not looking at like, dark red kidney beans and black beans. But of course, if that's what you want, if that's what you like, go for it. It's just not what he used. We're talking a lot of onion, a lot of garlic, a lot of peppers, several pounds of tomatillos just, chopped up to cook down in there. And, the beans of your choice. And for him, it was usually a light colored bean. Then, in goes all that good pork meat. Bring it up to a simmer. Cook it till it's good and done. And serve it up with some sour cream and some habanero sauce and some fresh fried tortilla chips, which is another thing that he really liked. You just have, corn tortillas, cut them in wedges the shapes of chips and fry them, and they will crisp up very nicely. And it's actually that easy, and it's amazingly good. Of course, you can add to it whatever you want. Totally up to you. But that green pork chili, I can't have it without thinking about Uncle Joe. It's as fiery and hot and interesting and a little crazy as he was. And speaking of the hot peppers, one of my earliest childhood memories was his mother, my great-grandmother, had a wicked sense of humor. I already told you how she liked to fight and such. She also liked to pull pranks on people. And the grandkids, her favorite trick on the grandkids was getting us way out in the field, like over a mile from the house. And she'd pick a pepper and hand it to you and say, try this pepper. And she'd say, it's not hot, it's a sweet pepper. And it would be hot. So you'd be out there on a hot summer day with no water, a mile from the house where the well was, where you could get yourself some cold water, and she'd just fry your mouth with hot peppers because she loved hot peppers. that's one of the things that makes my family cooking legacy very interesting. We have this little bit of Creole influence and such in the family, and like I said before, most folks in Eastern NC did not grow up, or Eastern South Carolina, did not grow up eating celery. We did. Did not grow up eating garlic. We did, and did not grow up eating hot peppers. And so long before salsa became popular in the late 80s, early 90s, at my grandmother's table, and always at my great grandmother's table, there would be a plate of whatever vegetables were coming in fresh out of the garden that would go well. Some chopped cucumbers, some sliced tomatoes, and always peppers. Always at least banana peppers, but several varieties of peppers would be on that plate. And there'd be hot peppers in the vinegar, that goes on the collard greens and such. And as you ate, you just grab, a fresh pepper and just eat it right along as part of your meal. I guess what they call that, crudité these days. Well, we always just, we either had a salad or we had a plate of fresh vegetables. We ate more salads when lettuce was in season. Lettuce is a cool weather crop. It will bolt in the hot weather. In hot weather, we had tomato and cucumber and peppers with every single dinner, and it was really nice. And I was really surprised growing up to find out that everybody else was not eating like that. But I was very blessed and fortunate to have a unique mix of heritage. A lot of people in that area of the country are just plain Scots-Irish, straight Scots-Irish. Some are just English or a mix of Scots-Irish and English. Some Germans in there, lots of Lumbee Indians, and lots of black folk. For us to have that French and Creole influence, Cajun influence, Acadian, whatever, that really was unique, and that's what made me fall in love with food. Really did. Maybe next week I'll talk about my grandmother's potato salad or something. I mean, it was so different from everybody else's potato salad in the community that at like a family reunion, a wedding, a funeral, anywhere where people were bringing food, a church supper, people would line up to eat my grandmother's cooking. They would leave their own mother and grandmother's cooking alone, except for the desserts usually. Everybody loves the desserts. And they would line up to eat whatever my grandmother had fixed. Sometimes they even said that people would show up at family reunions or funerals and such that weren't even related to us, just to eat my grandmother's cooking, because she was known to be the best cook in the community. Her mother was known to be the best cook in the community. My great grandfather's mother was known to be the best cook in the community, and it's really that French lineage blending in with the Scots-Irish and the English and the Lumbee and the German and just really, really good food, no doubt about it. I don't think. I mean, I would take people, friends of mine, to eat at my grandmother's house, and they didn't want to leave. I mean, they would just be going back for seconds and thirds and fourths and fifths. It was good food, y'all. All right, so let's get into the mallows. Marshmallow is what most herbalists use. Okay, it's a plant named marshmallow. It's not the confection. Now, originally, see, mallow has a mucilaginous quality, like okra, like the sliminess of okra, right? It's very soothing to the membranes. That's why it's used so much in herbal medicine. But in cooking, long before they had corn syrup and all that, they would take the juice of the mallow and cook it with sugar and whip it. And that mucilaginous quality would form these wonderful, I mean, I've actually had real marshmallow candies, made from actual mallow before. They're dense and chewy. Still sometimes you get like French marshmallows, which have that same dense, chewy texture, but even those are now mostly made with corn syrup. If you want the real deal, you're going to have to do it yourself. Back in like the 1600s, Culpeper said, common mallows are so generally well known that there's no need for description. Well, that ship has sailed. Most people don't know at all what the plants are that are growing around them anymore. So, we're just going to kind of get into some of these uses because, like I said, these plants are almost ubiquitous. I mean, just about anywhere you go, you're going to find some members of the mallow family if you know where to look for them and if you know what you're looking for. The flower is a very specific, it has a unique look. If you think about a rose of Sharon or a hibiscus flower, just think of that as a miniature level in like the marshmallow and most of the more weedy, wild mallows. There's one called cheeses. Cheeses is one of the mallows, and it's called that because the flower buds before they open look like little wheels of cheese. And apparently in England and early America, the kids all love to go out in the fields and gather handfuls of cheeses and those buds, the flower buds of mallow, and just snack on them. That was a big thing. It was a seasonal delight, back when people were more connected to nature. So, my favorite modern teacher, my favorite current teacher is Dr. Patrick Jones, Doc Jones, as we all call him. Mallow is one of his favorite herbs. It's like probably one of the ones he recommends most. I mean, in like the top five, certainly. And he recommends it in all cases of trauma to external tissue, in all irritation of the digestive tract. He even uses mallow in treating wounds that are beginning to go gangrenous. He's a veterinarian. He's a veterinary doctor and a naturopath, and he uses herbs to treat wounds in animals. And of course, a veterinarian is going to see more gangrenous wounds than a standard doctor at a hospital these days. And instead of using many of the treatments that most doctors would use, he uses a combination of herbs. And mallow is one of those. And on the Grow Network, he has some classes. You can take some great herb classes on the Grow Network. And anything Dr. Patrick Jones does is just fantastic. He has the Homegrown School of Herbal Medicine. When someone asks me, where do I go for a formal herb class to become certified, I say, well, you can come to me, but if I'm not doing one right now, absolutely go to Dr. Patrick Jones, the Homegrown School of Herbal Medicine, and a lot of his content is on the Grow Network. He has one class where he's showing these wounds. When the animal comes in, he's taking a picture, and then day by day, as he has applied these herbs, and like I said, mallow is one of the key ones, plantains in there and different ones, to these wounds, they heal amazingly. I mean, the infection goes away, the rot goes away, and he's also used them for people, and it seems to prevent scarring from these wounds. And these could be really bad wounds. There's one lady that had a big tumor removed from her scalp. I mean, a big, nasty tumor. I mean, like about the size of a baseball. And of course, when they did that, they took away a lot of skin and a lot of hair. So not only was she going to have a horrible scar, but a big bald spot for the rest of her life, right? Well, using these herbs, and he showed it with pictures week after week, not only did the wound close up, it did so without much scarring, and the hair all grew back. So that's impressive. I don't know really any modern medicines that compare. And yeah, it's just an almost miraculous herb for tissue trauma. It's just incredibly soothing. One of the books, speaking of modern use, we might as well stay on that for a minute. I have kind of picked on a book called The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies quite a bit because I think the title is ridiculous. None of these remedies are lost. It is actually a pretty good book. And they recommend, let me see, I think the Nicole Apillian, I don't know, PhD, and Claude Davis are the authors. And they recommend marshmallow as being good for acid indigestion, peptic ulcers, leaky gut, and digestive issues. One of them says, I use the root of marshmallow plant to treat stomach problems caused by excess stomach acid and for leaky gut. It is effective in neutralizing the acid and relieving symptoms. The root has a moderate laxative effect, which makes it useful in treating intestinal problems such as colitis, ileitis, irritable bowel syndrome, diverticulitis. I also use it as an ingredient in my leaky gut blend as it forms a protective layer around perforations in the gut. Now, I wanted to mention this because a lot of people are really concerned about leaky gut these days. We're eating bad food and taking too many antibiotics. This is a good herb to help prevent and heal leaky gut. Some of the treatments for leaky gut are things that are rather unpleasant. I do not want to have any fecal transplants, trust me. I don't want anybody else's poop in my body. But if you do, hey, whatever. But if you were to use mallow, maybe you could avoid such extreme measures and have a lot of fermented foods. Today I'm going to make a good batch of sauerkraut, and I think the more fermented foods, the more kefir and kombucha and buttermilk, good old buttermilk, you have, the better off you're going to be. Pickles and yogurt and all that good stuff. They also recommend it for dry coughs. Remember I said it has that soothing mucilaginous property for bronchitis, bronchoasthma, congestion, and pleurisy. Because marshmallow is so good at treating the membranes, it makes a good antidote for respiratory problems. It relieves swelling and irritation of the mucous membrane and calms the respiratory system. Also continuing in modern use, Plants for a Future says marshmallow is a very useful household medicinal herb. Its soothing demulcent properties make it very effective in treating inflammations and irritations of the mucous membrane, such as in the alimentary canal, the urinary and respiratory organs. The root counters excess stomach acid, peptic ulceration, and gastritis. It is also applied externally to burns, sprains, aching muscles, insect bites, skin inflammation, splinters, etc. The whole plant, but especially the root, is antitussive. That means it helps stop a cough, basically. Demulcent, which means softening. Diuretic, I think it means softening and moistening, actually. But diuretic, highly emollient, which means softening, and slightly laxative. An infusion of the leaves is used to treat cystitis and frequent urination. The leaves are harvested in August when the plant is just coming into flower and can be dried for later use. I believe Dr. Patrick Jones also recommends marshmallow in part of his protocol for kidney stones and bladder stones and all that, just to help lubricate the tubes. It's a very useful, soothing, calming herb that is very good for any kind of irritated tissue. So makes it useful in that case, and probably kind of helps the stone kind of slip on out a little bit easier as well. He also, another herb, interestingly, that he recommends along with that is like skullcap or viburnum to relax. They are antispasmodic. They kind of dilate and relax the tubes. You've got an antispasmodic herb combined with a lubricating herb like mallow, and then you get some your diuretic and anti-lithotropic, which means anti stones or gravel in the urinary system, or gallstones even. Herbs like parsley, just a simple herb like parsley, plantain, asparagus, etc. And you can really get things to move on through a lot easier, And honestly, modern medicine has nothing to compare for bladder, kidney, gallstones, etc. Gravel, as they used to call it. They have nothing that compares with herbal medicine. I mean, that is one place where herbal medicine beats allopathic medicine, I think is a proper term that no one really uses, beats them hands down. And Doc Jones is kind of the expert on that too. He probably knows more about the kidney stones and such than just about any other herbalist. And great guy. He's got something like 15 or 20 kids. He adopted most of them. Great sense of humor, big heart, smart, sharp as a whip, sharp as a tack. I don't know, but and he does really good products too. That's one also that I can really recommend when people say, "Where should I buy an herbal tincture or formula?" Well, there are a few that come to mind, obviously, but Doc Jones is going to be at the top of that list. Super fantastic person. Going back a little bit, let's get into a little bit of the history, because I always find that interesting. Miss Grieve mentions mallows being mentioned in the Bible. In the book of Job, mallow was eaten in times of famine. Just a little controversy of whether that was a true mallow. Plant names change over time. Could have been a member of the Orach family or C. purslane. But anyway, mallows have been known as a famine food in the ancient world. Just like today, we don't know what's going to happen with the supply chain. We don't know when we could have food shortages. This is one of the plants you're going to want to get to know as a forager as well as an herbalist. Find it, grow it, be able to identify it, and use it when need be. It was mentioned by Horace, Greek poet. I guess you describe as a poet. Yeah, Virgil. Both of them had a fondness for mallow, and Virgil said it was also one of the favorite foods of goats. So that's interesting. She said Dioscorides extols it as a remedy, and in ancient days it was not only valued as a medicine, but used, especially the musk mallow, to decorate graves of friends. It was used as a decorative plant in cemeteries. Pliny said, "Whosoever shall take a spoonful of the mallows shall that day be free from all diseases that may come to him. All mallows contain abundant mucilage, and the Arab physicians in early times used the leaves as a poultice to suppress inflammation." In her time, which was the 1930s, mallow was still being used by physicians and pharmacists in England and France. It was listed in official medicine. She also mentions that in France, the young tender leaves of marshmallow were a popular salad ingredient in the spring, eaten uncooked in spring salads for their property of stimulating the kidneys. And a syrup made from the roots was used for the same purpose. Specifically, Dioscorides, he really wrote a lot about mallows. So did Pliny the Elder, so did Theophrastus, and all those guys. He said the raw leaves, chewed with a little salt and rubbed on with honey, are able to cure ulcers of the inner angle of the eye, but it must be brought to a sore and then must be used with salt. Rubbed on, it is effective for bee and wasp stings, and if a man is rubbed with it beforehand, raw and pounded, he remains unstrikeable. I have no idea how that could possibly be the case, but we are talking a document written over 2,000 years ago. He said a decoction of it is a softening bath for the womb and is fit in suppositories for pangs of hunger in the intestines for the womb and the perineum. The broth boiled together with the roots helps all poisonings, but those who drink it must continually vomit it up. That was to help get the poison out. It is good for those bitten by harvest spiders, and it brings out milk. The seed of wild lotus is mixed with it and taken as a drink with wine to lessen disorders of the bladder. And specifically Althea, that would be our marshmallow. That's wild mallow. Also a very good Grateful Dead song. I always really liked, one of the concerts where Jerry would start singing Althea. I don't think they ever put that one on a record, but it was a good song. Anyway, Althea is a kind of wild mallow. And this is interesting. Let me just get on the side. You know who the most unlikely deadhead is in the world? Steve Bannon. Yes, Steve Bannon, the ultra-conservative, Trump supporter. I watch his show every day, by the way, 6 days a week anyway. He is a die-hard Grateful Dead fan. I don't know how many shows he went to. I think he collects tapes. I mean, what a unique bunch of people the Dead drew to them. I mean, from the old bluegrass players that's how I got to know them in the mountains of North Carolina. Brilliant jazz musicians, tons of hippies, and people like Steve Bannon. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. He actually did a whole show celebrating Jerry Garcia's birthday last year. It was really surprising. Of course, as Trump said, he's kind of a scruffy guy. So I guess we Irish kind of have that reputation and would kind of fit in at a Dead show. Anyway, he said of Althea, which as I said is marshmallow or wild mallow, it has downy leaves and a rose-like flower. He goes on and describes it a little bit. Boiled in honey and water or wine, or pounded by itself, it is good for wounds, inflamed glands such as mumps, swellings, suppurations, inflamed breasts, disorders of the perineum, bruises, flatulent tumors, That's a word I've never seen combined with the word tumor. Okay, we'll go with that. And distensions of the nerves. It dissolves and ripens or breaks and brings to a scar. Boiled as above and kneaded together with swine's grease, that's lard, or goose grease or turpentine, it is good in a pessary for inflammations and closures of the womb. That's sort of like a suppository taken in the other area. A decoction of it does the same, also expelling the so-called bodily waste. A decoction of the root taken as a drink with wine helps dysentery, pains in the hips, trembling, and those troubled with hernias. And it soothes toothache, boiled with vinegar and the mouth washed with it. The seed, either green or dry, pounded into small pieces and rubbed on with vinegar in the sun, cleans vitiligines. Vitiligines. That's a form of leprosy, by the way, skin disease. Rubbed on with oxalium, that's an oil from oxalis or wood sorrel, It prevents hurt from poisonous beasts. It is effective against dysentery, vomiting blood, and excessive discharge of the bowels. A decoction of the seed taken as a drink is good against bee stings and those of all small creatures, taken in wine. And the leaves with a little oil are laid on bites on those who are burned, and on those who are burned. The root thickens water, and this is how you make marshmallow, the candy. The root actually thickens water. It makes it syrupy, thick, viscous. Pounded. It has to be pounded in small pieces, mixed, and he starts talking about different names in different countries that went over. Monastic medicine, following the Christianization of the Roman Empire, spread herbal medicine from the Greek and Roman tradition throughout Europe. Mallow was one of the official herbs of the apothecary. It was grown in physic gardens of monasteries, and it was one that the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne commanded to be grown in gardens throughout the empire in the Capitulare around 802 AD. St. Hildegard von Bingen wrote in Physica that mallow prevails against fevers. If the person has fevers of any kind, he should pour mallow into vinegar and drink it in the morning on an empty stomach and at night. The fever, whatever the nature, will cease. A person who has a pain in his head should crush mallow with a bit less sage and mix in a little olive oil. He should warm it in his hand or near the fire and place it on his forehead. He should tie it on with a cloth and go to bed, and he will do better. Monastic medicine eventually became German folk medicine. Father Nape said that the mallow he used was Althea rosea. That means rose-like mallow, essentially. Among the flowers in the garden, mallow must not be missing. When the good Creator painted their blossoms so pleasing to the eye, he poured a drop of medicinal sap into the paint for every little leaf. Mallow blossoms, especially those of the black mallow, prepared as a tea, cure throat infirmities, loosen the phlegm in the chest. These blossoms are generally mixed with those of mullein. For vapors, whether it be for inhaling or particularly for ear vapors, the mallow proves of great service. At vapors, steam. It means steam, inhaling it or using it in the ear to loosen wax and help with an earache. It's very useful. Mullein flower oil is fantastic, and the combination of mullein with mallow would be a no-brainer, really, to soothe that tissue, while you're getting rid of the infection, because mullein actually has some good antiseptic properties. So anyway. Brother Aloysius used Malva rotundifolius and Althea officinalis. That's marshmallow. Used for inflammation of the mucous membranes, consumption, in enemas, inflammation, all complaints of the respiratory organs. Officinalis used for bladder complaints, painful urination, chest complaints, painful coughs, sore throats, heavy bleeding on the onset of pneumonia, inflammation of the stomach, diarrhea, dysentery, and other intestinal complaints. Used for any type of inflammation, wasp or bee stings. It was very popular, as I mentioned, Culpeper saying in the 1600s. Gerard had said in the 1500s, the leaves of marshmallow are of the power to digest, mitigate pain, and to concoct. They be good effect mixed with fomentations and poultices against the pains of the side, the stone, the bladder. They also serve to take away any matter of pain. Decoction of the leaves drunk doeth the same, which doth not only assuage pain which proceedeth of the stone, but also is very good to cause the same to descend more easily and to pass forth. Well, that's a fancy Elizabethan way of saying exactly what Dr. Patrick Jones said. To lubricate the tubes, reduce inflammation, and help you pass a bladder or kidney stone. He said the roots and seeds could be used the same way. People, not everybody likes to hear me read Shakespearean type old English writing, so I think I've done enough of that for today, and I'll just try to sum up a few of these. He said it was really good for making ointments combined with oils and for plasters and such. The root boiled with wine helps clear the stone and the gravel, also helps with bloody flux, that's diarrhea, sciatica, cramps, and convulsions. He combined the root of mallows and the leaves with the leaves of violets and a little bit of fenugreek boiled together. Everything's pounded up in a mortar and pestle. Well, he also used black bryony. Well, that's a very dangerous herb. Okay, shouldn't be used internally. He's talking externally though, so let's not freak out. Mixed with lard, essentially, pounded together in the form of a poultice and applied warm, it would mollify and soften pustules and hard swellings, swellings in the joints, and sores of the mother. It consumeth all cold tumors, blastings, and windy outgrowings. It cureth the rift of the fundament. It comforteth, defendeth, and preserveth dangerous green wounds. In other words, he was using it exactly as Doc Jones used for wounds and ulcerated wounds and gangrenous wounds and sores and all that. Okay, that's just a real fancy way of saying that it's really good for sores and wounds and some and swellings and such as that. He also used the seeds for not just bloody diarrhea, but also excessive menstruation, other issues of blood, as he calls it. And 100 years later, Culpeper was still using basically the exact same way. So the roots boiled in wine or water with parsley and fennel help open the body, are very convenient in hot agues or fevers, and other distempers of the body to apply the leaves so boiled warm to the belly. It not only voids hot, choleric, and other offensive humors, but eases the pains and torments of the belly coming thereby. He also mentioned that it increases breast milk. It's considered a galactagogue. He used it for various lung ailments, pleurisy, congestion, inflammations of the lungs, all kinds of bowel issues, all kinds of digestive issues. He used the leaves, just pounded up with a little honey, just laid on the eyes, on the eyelids while you're sleeping, to soothe the eyes and help with eye inflammations. He found it good somehow for epilepsy. I honestly don't know how that works, but he said it was especially good for the falling sickness. And well, apparently by the 1600s, they were finding it useful for epilepsy. I don't know how that works, okay? I really don't. But definitely worth a try, as it's, one of the most harmless herbs on the face of the earth. They also found it very useful, basically against shingles. I believe that's what they called St. Anthony's fire at the time. And all other hot, red, and painful swellings on any part of the body. The flower boiled in water with a little honey and alum put on, and is also an excellent gargle to wash, cleanse, or heal any sore in the mouth or throat in a very short space of time. He said it really healed the sores in the mouth up very quickly. If the feet be bathed or washed with a decoction of the leaves, roots, and flowers, it helps much. Oh, that was found specifically good for headaches and epilepsy. Again, very interesting. Don't know if anyone's ever looked into that in modern times to see if or how or why that might help. But a foot bath and the head being washed with the same would also help not only with epilepsy, but he believed would help prevent falling or shedding of hair, baldness, in other words. And you will see mallow in a lot of formulas for like alopecia and various conditions like that. And he also found it specifically extra special good for kidney and bladder problems and coughs. Anything involving tubes. So from the intestines to the urinary tract to the lungs and the sinuses and the ears and all that. And back to maybe a little bit more modern author, the great Yule Gibbons, author of Stalking the Wild Asparagus, Stalking the Healthful Herbs, Stalking the Blue-Eyed Scallop. Excellent classic books. I absolutely love Yule Gibbons' work. Really big influence on me when I was in my teens. One of those authors that really shaped who I was to become. He really enjoyed boiling the roots and then frying them with butter and onions. So I can see that as a really nice wild food. Good to know, like I said, in case of shortages, but it also just quite tasty. And he was also able to whip the mucilaginous slime left in the boiling water into a substitute for egg whites. And he enjoyed foraging for those little flower buds called cheeses. And interestingly enough, mallow is included in the Swedish bitters. So it does have the root is what's used, has a slight bitterish property, and it's, that's one of those classic herbal formulas that is absolutely steeped in history and just like a total overall tonic. It helps with immunity, it helps with digestion, and people have sworn that they lived to be over 100 years old because they took Swedish bitters every day. Again, I can't swear to that. I'm only in my 40s. I'll tell you in another 50 or 60 years. I'll say, hey, my great-grandparents and great-uncles and aunts, I mean, everybody lives to be in their 90s and over 100 years old. So, yeah, I could probably still be talking to y'all in another 60 years. And maybe by then I can tell you how well Swedish bitters has worked for me. In the meantime, get to know the Mallow family. I did a show probably over a year ago where I was working my way through Thomas J. Elpel's Botany in a Day. Remember last week I could not remember his name? Elpel, Botany in a Day. And I did a show on mallows. And if you want to back up, go pull that old episode. Various members of the mallow family, and there are so many, and a lot of them will surprise you. And you'll start spotting mallows everywhere. They're an easy plant to learn, a very safe plant, and a great plant to use in many ways in herbal medicine. And, if you make my great uncle's Chili Verde, and you make it as hot and spicy as I do, be sure to have some of that mallow around because it will burn your butt. I'm just going to warn you. You eat a couple bowls of that, you're probably going to be waking up about 5 or 6 in the morning, and you're going to have a few trips to the bathroom the next day, and it will warm you up. It will definitely warm you up. But it's worth it because it's delicious. All right, y'all, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.